Hi guys, this is Katie Bunchoten of Certum Solutions outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And today we're going to go through a review of QuickBooks Enterprise for contractors, okay? Before we get started, if you could please like this video, if this is the kind of content that you like, or if you're in construction and you're like, hey, I really need you to talk more about construction because, man, I got opinions and I got words. So, uh, like the video if you like the video, and then subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be alerted whenever we have new content out and stuff. For those that don't know, Certum Solutions specializes in software solutions that help our clients work more efficiently, follow current trends, and use automation in order to help their businesses run more smoothly, cost effectively. That means ROI. And today we work a lot with QuickBooks. So today we're going to focus on QuickBooks Enterprise, which just came out with Contractor a month or two ago. If you're on a previous edition of QuickBooks, so you're on 22 or whatever, and as I'm speaking, this is in November of 2022. I usually wait until about December, January to upgrade, just in case they have any maintenance releases to come out. But if you are a confident person and say you liked investing in IPOs and you just kind of, you're my edgy friends, go ahead and take a jump. So whatever you prefer. Um, One of the things that I want to touch base on as we're talking is if you are a contractor, change orders may be very important to you. Change orders are only available in the Contractor Edition of QuickBooks Enterprise, okay? And we call that a flavor, but it's only available in Contractor. So if you use a third-party host like our friends at Summit and so on, you can actually say, "Hey guys, I accidentally," and you have, say maybe you were sleepy and you did professional edition or general edition, because for those that don't know, enterprise is not just general edition. They have 5 or 6 different industry specific editions too that you choose during your first setup. You can call your hosting provider and say, hey, I installed the wrong edition, can you switch it to this kind? And they can usually do that with hop, skip, and a jump. If you set it up yourself, you can actually just delete the program, reinstall it, and I believe there might be a workaround where we can also use the help menu, but I think it might be a little bit tricky, so I would just go ahead and reinstall if it's not too much trouble. Okay, so that all being said, all the housekeeping out of the way, let's jump in. This is your home page, okay? Everybody's familiar with the QuickBooks homepage, especially if you have used QuickBooks for several years. One of the things that you're going to see that pops up new is this intercompany transactions. I'm not talking about it today because it doesn't always apply, but if you have multiple data files or multiple companies underneath like a brand, you guys know who you are, right? That intercompany function has been requested for several years, and it is here this year. Some of the other things you may want to keep in mind, if you're trying to decide between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop and you have multiple AR or AP accounts, Desktop supports multiple AR, multiple AP accounts. Online doesn't. Online's amazing. It's a great solution for certain people. Desktop is a great solution for certain people too. So touch base with us if you're not sure which one works best for you. But let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty. The first step whenever we're evaluating a new file or whenever you're wanting to take a look at a new file is to do your preferences, right? Everybody says, oh, well, I don't need the preferences. I have stuff I got to do. I have bills to pay. Da, da. Guess what? Preferences touch everything in this file. So I would say like 5 times out of 10, somebody calls with a question. They're like, I can't do this. I don't know why. And it's like, well, you have set this up in the preferences. Okay. I'm going to skip past most of these. My preferences is something for me. One person in my company is just for me. If this is something where you want to roll this out globally, okay, across the entire company file, that's company preferences. Another caveat, if you're changing your company preferences and you've already rolled this out to multiple users and you're using this file with multiple users, pick a time of the week when no one's going to be in there, because you're going to have to switch it to single user mode in many times so that you can make this change, okay? Because they have to roll it out across the entire file. Somebody's logged in, it's not going to allow you to do that in multi-user mode, okay? Because it could affect something they're doing and break your file, basically. Okay, so under company preferences and accounting, you've got your account numbers, which are your chart of account numbers. I've got another video on how some of the nuance there, but basically you set up a different account number depending on what chart of account or what account it is. Usually it's like 1 for assets, 2 for liabilities, 3 for equity, 4 for income. You can kind of tell I've been doing this a minute. 5 for cost of goods, 6 for expenses, 7 I believe is other income, 8 is other expenses, I think. And then you've got your 9s, which are usually saved for my do not use accounts, or things that I just don't take a prominent position on my stuff. So if you're a larger company, they may break it down even further where they want to have a division and a this and a that. And you do you, man. Just make sure that when you set up your chart of accounts and your numbering, try to give yourself some space so that you don't go back in and go, well, dang, I need to enter a new account here, but I've used up all my numbers. My number one rookie mistake for setting up chart of accounts is not leaving any space. So 1 is this, 2 is this, 3 is this. They go, gosh, I've got a new account and it needs to go right between 1 and 2. Now you got to redo them, man. It's not fun. So try to set yourself up for success and not worry about that. Okay, class tracking for transactions. If you need it, turn it on. I prefer the KISS method. So if you don't have to have that field to do some extra slicing and dicing, I recommend waiting for that until you actually do need it. Automatically assign journal entry number. I leave that to yes usually. Definitely warn when posting transaction retained earnings. Don't touch retained earnings unless you are an accountant, you know what you're doing, because you can really goof some stuff up there. Hide opening balance fields and names and items. 100% yes. Do not use opening balance fields. People use it all the time. They're like, oh, it makes it so easy. Well, it is called QuickBooks, but make it so easy. I just put in that I owe them so much money when I set up my file, and then it just let me go with it. Okay. This is what you've got. There's this trash account that I can't stand. You'll hear me rant about it in several videos called opening balance equity. That is the kind of accounts that makes CPAs cringe. Uh, Anybody cringe, tax preparers cringe, everybody cringe, because accounting is supposed to allocate funds and have like a very specific equation to keep things accurate. If you have a trash account where you're throwing extra balances where the system doesn't know where to put it, guess what? It's going to throw off that whole system. So don't use your opening balance account. If you do use it when you're setting the file up, which is the only time I can hypothetically think of you using it, zero it out ASAP as soon as you're done. Okay. Closing dates. Make sure the most responsible person in the office keeps this password. Do not share it. And then you want to make sure that you set your closing date so nobody can inadvertently change something. Exclude your non-posting transactions, estimates, sales orders, purchase orders from these closing date restrictions. I'm cool with that. Because if you need to backdate an estimate or whatever, that's not a problem. But you don't want to do anything that's going to financially impact your system. Benefits in HR. If you are in construction and you are looking for a payroll company, I would like to heartily recommend using QuickBooks Payroll. The reason being is that you can set it up to do your job costing at the point of payroll. You're not having to wait for all this. You know, you're not, what's my word here? You could set it up, you could do your job costing as you're doing payroll. You're not sitting here trying to do workarounds with third-party providers where you're breaking out your checks to items. People will say all the time, well, you know, my payroll processor has a general ledger integration where they will push everything to my chart of accounts. That's not going to do your job costing though, because when you're doing job costing QuickBooks Desktop, it has to touch items. I have yet to meet a third-party payroll provider. If you are one and you're watching this video, send me an email that will actually map it to the item itself so that you can do those job costing reports. So it just really creates kind of a goof. It's a pain in the neck. You can do the after the fact payroll stuff like that, but it's again a pain in the neck. Typically what I do with situations like that is I use a check function because you can click on the items tab and break out the actual amount you received, but that requires some manual work. So just keep it in mind, because if you did your payroll with QuickBooks Assisted Payroll, you've got QuickBooks helping you with your filings, and then you're doing your job costing at the same time, just saying. Some situations where this is applicable is if you want a PEO, professional employer organization. If you want a PEO, then this may not be the solution for you. They are not a professional employer organization. Those are the ones that take like a lot of the responsibility for your employees, handle the HR and the rest. And you're basically leasing your people from yourself. Or if you have like over 150, 175 employees, they've raised the limit, I think, recently to 175, But if you have too many employees for QuickBooks, you may need to look at that third-party provider. And if I do come up with a third-party provider that can do job costing with an integration to desktop, I will let you know. Okay. Bills, these are just preferences. Calendar, I never use a calendar. Am I supposed to say that? I don't know, but I've never used a calendar. Checking is basically preferences. Okay. And you can kind of work through this on your own. Okay. And then you've got your desktop view, preferences, finance charge, preferences. I very much prefer the desktop finance charges to the online finance charges, by the way. General, under this time piece, if you're using a third-party timekeeping system other than QuickBooks Time, and you need to export from that system and import into QuickBooks, I heartily recommend making sure this time format is the same as the other system to make things easier on you. Moving on, integrated applications. If you use a third-party hosting provider and you use QuickBooks Time, okay, which is super cool for construction companies because it has kiosks. They have kiosks that you can buy and stuff. It's really cool. And put on the job site so you can track people when they get to the job site. You may notice if you use a hosting company that depending on your hosting company, I don't think this is true with Summit, but I know with Rate Networks it is, and maybe some others, but I'm not sure. When you close out of your environment after you're done working in it for the day, you think that's staying up like your computer at work. It's not. It spins down and closes off. Okay. Then when you come back in the morning, it spins back up. Okay. So what you're going to notice is you're going to go, well, QuickBooks Time is supposed to have a real-time integration to QuickBooks, but my time records aren't coming over. How curious. The reason is because when it spins down, it stops that integration. So you got to turn it back on and you'll do so from here. Okay. Just something to remember. We've used it that way before and it didn't bother me at all. I would bring it in during payroll and bring it in for something else. But it didn't really impact me, but it's something to know. Okay. Because I always hear people going, well, I'm supposed to have real-time integration, but I don't know because it's not coming in. And that's why. Okay. Items in inventory, depending on what kind of structure your company has, you may or may not track a lot of inventory. You know, several companies use lean inventory where they're buying it strictly for the job and they're not really keeping any inventory on hand, in which case a lot of this may not apply to you, but I'm going to talk about it real quick. Inventory purchase orders are active, yes or no. When calculating quantity available, please deduct quantity reserved for pending builds, quantity on sales orders. If you want to know more about what a pending build is in this page, I would really recommend jumping over to my manufacturing demo because I go through this a lot more in depth. But for construction, it may not be as applicable, and I'm trying to keep this condensed, so I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot. But if you do builds, if you do assembly items, you want to put that on. If you do sales orders and you don't want to sell the same thing to two different people, which I don't know why you would want to unless your lead times are super long and you have some kind of reasoning in your head, I would turn that on too. And then if you have inventory, if you're tracking inventory, please check don't allow negative quantities because people don't realize how easy it is to let that get out of hand. And then you're trying to clean it up in December or November. And guess what? We work a lot in December or November on trying to do inventory cleanup with people. So save yourself the time, the cost, the money, and just watch it. Don't do those negative inventory quantities because they have negative implications across several different parts of your accounting. Okay, multiple inventory sites. In construction, I would see you maybe using trucks, maybe using construction sites as inventory sites if you are buying a lot of material and storing it on site and you want to track that. So you would just turn that on. I'm leaving it off for today. Serial lot number and expiration. If you work with expiration dates, which typically you're not in construction, I came from the perishables world before I started this company, so I very much love that expiration dates are new in QuickBooks 2023. That's a new feature. Last year, this thing was like a third of the size that it is today. Okay, but I'm not going to talk about that because we're talking about construction today. FIFO, if you use FIFO costing first in, first out, you can turn this on. If you don't turn it on, it uses average. Barcode scanning, barcodes with QuickBooks. The way they work is you scan the item and you count how many you have. You don't scan, it counts how many you had. Okay, if you want to know more about barcode scanning, jump on to one of my barcode videos. And then if you need to assign barcodes and you're not using very strict UPCs. You could also use the barcode wizard if you're just using it for identification or what have you. I'm not going to turn on purchase order fulfillment, sales order fulfillment, but if you want to know how those work, guess what? You know what I'm going to say. You know, got a video for that already. Something to note though, if you are using barcode scanning, it only works on Android operating system, so you can't use it on iPhone. If you want to use it on iPhone and you're open to a third party, let us know. We've got iPhone inventory systems that we can work with you on. Landed costs. If you have freight and things like that, and you do have inventory and you're wanting to like bundle, customs fees and the rest into the cost of your inventory and have that allocated correctly, you can set up landed cost account. Um, with all of this that I talk about today, always make sure that you're checking with your advisor to make sure you're setting this up the way they want to see it. In construction, again, just to reiterate, there are multiple systems of revenue recognition. You want to make sure whatever you're doing is GAAP if GAAP applies to you. And then, but depending on how you set up your preferences, it will reflect things differently. Okay, hit no. Oh, shoot, unit of measure. You can either define your own unit of measure, like if I buy a truckload of wood and I sell it in planks, whatever, you can define that, or you can take one of the canned units of measure if that's something you use. Enhanced inventory receiving. Again, this page is mainly for manufacturing, but I'm just running through it. Enhanced inventory receiving, what it is with regular receiving, I do an item receipt to say I receive inventory. It's going to do this temporary item receipt transaction, right? And then once I do the bill, the item receipt goes poof. Okay. When I have enhanced inventory receiving on, it actually brings that item receipt to a balance sheet account, and then you have to reconcile that account every month, which is basically like reconciling your bank statement, because that item receipt may not match the actual final bill and things like that. And it just adds a lot of work. So you run into a lot of people that are like, I thought I wanted the enhanced receiving, but now I prefer to keep it simple. I wish I hadn't turned it on. And once you turn it on, you can't turn it off. Okay. So if you prefer the poof, which most people do, leave this off. If you do decide to turn it on, for whatever your reasoning is, I'm not going to judge. Then just make sure you make like 100 copies of your file before you do it, because you're probably going to have to roll back to them. Jobs and estimates. This is your bread and butter if you're in construction. So you can change the status names and labels. You cannot change how it behaves. You can't say, well, I want my pending estimates to behave this way. Doesn't work like that. You can change what they're called, but you can't change how they work. Do you create estimates? Yes, most construction companies will. Do you do progress invoicing? Yes. If you get paid on draws, things like that, you've got your retainer system set up, you want that turned on. And most construction companies will use progress invoicing, but again, check with your advisor. Multiple currencies. I prefer to leave this in one currency. If you do use multi-currency, there are several businesses where this would apply to. Try to keep your home currency as the US dollar if you have a choice, because if it's not, certain features will behave differently. Like bank feeds, you can't use bank feeds anymore. They only support US dollar. And there's other little nuances there. But if you do need multiple currencies, use your multiple currencies. I'm not stopping you. Payments. If you want a training on how to use QuickBooks Payments, go through us when you set up QuickBooks Payments. We have a free training that we provide to people to set up payments with us. If you want to turn this on, bank transfer, this goes through QuickBooks Payments, and credit card are your options. Your bank transfer is definitely going to be cheaper. Your credit card is more widely requested, okay? You can set up bank transfer only here and then turn on credit card at the transaction level. So if you say, I'm just turning on bank transfer for now, and then if you get Bob that calls and says, hey man, I just really want to pay for this with my credit card, you could then change his transaction to say credit card. Okay. Do you want to set payment reminders? Yes or no? They used to call this automatic. I still see that pop up once again. This isn't automatic. Otherwise, why would it say prompt me to send them at? I'm being quiet for effect. It's not a natural thing that comes to me. But if you want to send payment reminders, it will prompt you. Okay. It'll tell you when to send them. Payroll and employees. Again, excuse me. If you want to use job costing, if you use job costing, I heartily recommend using this if you're using the reports that we're going to go through today. And then reminders, you can set them up to your preference. Reports and graphs, set them up to your preference. Under this collapsed transactions, I heartily recommend doing that for external report needs. If you have like a bank or somebody asking you for financials, I'll give you an example. Maybe you have an account, it's called advertising and promotion. You have like digital advertising, this advertising, this advertising. It says this very secret campaign I don't want people knowing about. You can hit that collapse transactions button and it closes and it rolls everything up into advertising promotions. It's a need to know basis, man. You don't need to know that. So you can roll that up. Aging reports is a preference. Summary reports, for those that don't know, accrual will reflect income based on the date of the invoice, with the assumption being that the invoice more closely correlates with when that revenue was earned. Your cash base is going to key off of your payment receipt from your customer. So when they paid you for that invoice, which is when the cash passed hands. And these are the two main revenue recognition types that you're going to see. You also have nuancy stuff like modified cash and the rest of this, and it goes all down an IRS rabbit hole. But make sure that you're tying all these preferences in with whatever you've elected as your reporting standards, coupled with what your advisor tells you. Okay, I'm here to provide possibly, hopefully, some entertainment along with a little bit of education, but I am not your CPA, I am not your tax advisor, I am not your accountant. So reach out to them or reach out to us if you need one of them. Okay, reports, show accounts by, okay, and then it's got your classified cash if you use cash flows, and then you've got your default formatting and so on. Somewhere in here, I jump back to payroll and employees. Please never display social security numbers on reports. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. I'm sure somebody has requested it enough to where they thought it was relevant to put here. But as someone who could be an employee herself, I would not want my social security number on any form of reports. And I'm sure that there are many people that feel the same. So don't. Sales and customers, we've got this information here. There are some nuances between price levels and advanced pricing, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through those today. Do you charge sales tax? Okay. If you have a third-party sales tax compliance software, don't touch this till you talk to them and see how they want you to set it up. If you don't and you're doing your own sales tax, some construction companies may say, well, I don't think I have sales tax. Depending on your state and your Department of Revenue, they may say you need to charge sales tax on certain things. Like I know in some states, they'll say, well, if it's a capital improvement to the building and residential construction, they want you to get a waiver from your customer and they consider that an increase in their property tax. However, if it's cosmetic, it doesn't add value to the actual property, they'll want you to charge sales tax, okay? Or maybe maintenance too. All has to do with capitalization and property taxes and the rest. And again, I kid you not, like there's so many different state requirements. I'm not going to get into them, but just so you know, just check with your advisor and see how they want to set that up. Okay. QuickBooks Desktop, this is how often to update the search function, setting up your forms. Don't wait to send your first form to set this up because I'm telling you now, if your email server gives you any trouble, you don't want to be working on this at 10 o'clock at night. Okay, so set it up when you're doing your preferences. You've got your service connection, you've got your spelling, you've got your tax and 1099, and then you've got your time and expenses. If you're using job costing with QuickBooks, this has to be turned on because this is where it's getting the information to do the job costing. Da, da, da. I love how, it does actually follow a flow. And honestly, any kind of software is just trying to figure out how the different little bits of info connect to each other. And then I do this all the time, create invoices from time and expenses, track reimbursed expenses as income. Do I have a default markup if I'm asking for reimbursement? I usually put 5 because I'm gonna first off, I'm gonna have to allocate for whatever additional time it took us to administer those expenses and the rest. So you set up yours and so forth. Do you want to track mileage? Okay, you may want to do that. So I hit cancel on all that. So now we're back at our home screen and you've now just gone through preferences. Okay. We've got our view, which is pretty self-explanatory. Multi-monitor mode, I still have people that use multi-monitor mode. If you have 2 screens, make sure they're the same size. You can't use multi-monitor mode with screens that are different sizes. Crazy, right? So make sure that if you're planning to use multi-monitor mode, you have the same size screens. under your lists, this is going to be your lists. You've got your chart of accounts. I did another video on how chart of accounts work. So check that out, but I will show you what it looks like. You've got your account name or number. You can under here hit new, edit, delete. You can delete an account if there's nothing tied to it. But once you have stuff tied to it, you can make it inactive where it will show up on reports if it is touched, but that's it, okay? So if the report doesn't touch that account, you won't see it show up. Where if it's an active account, it'll still show up if nothing's touching it, unless you set up your filters to not, like on that specific report, you say don't show zeros. You could customize your columns. A lot of people don't know this. You can import your chart of accounts from Excel. It's one of the easiest imports you can do. Print your list and resort your list. Don't print your list from here. Run to your report section and print it from there, okay? And then you've got activities that could be around your chart of accounts. I don't use these very much. I usually use my little menu at the top because I'm used to using Excel. You've got your reports here, okay? And if you click on account listing, that'll scoot you over to the report section to print that too. And then do you have attachments? A lot of people don't realize with QuickBooks Enterprise, you do have an attachments function where you can keep a library of attachments, and I heartily recommend doing that. Okay, so we've touched on the chart of accounts. Now we're going to do item list, which is a different flavor of chart of accounts. And in construction, you all need to pay very close attention to your item list because this is where you're going to get your cost centers, okay, or your cost codes. This is a sample file. You don't have to set this up this way. You could set it up according to whatever standard you have. But with construction, you have something called phase accounting, okay? And it just means like things follow in phases. And the way this, and typically that's like, you think about it, you maybe have your blueprints, you maybe have your grading, and then you've got your foundation work, and then the rest. It's just like you're building a house, right? And with me, I like setting them up to where the beginning's at the ones and then it continues, okay? I believe some associations have different ways that they prefer to have it. If you're doing AIA billing, you know, you have to pay attention to how it needs to be reflected there. But for today, I'm just running through how QuickBooks work. When it comes to your job costing, it all keys off of this item list. So do not put it aside. A lot of people say, well, I'm not a manufacturer. I don't sell items. I do construction. I don't have to do this piece. This all ties in. I'm screaming it for the people in the back. It all ties into your job costing. Very important you get this right, okay? And you can tweak it as you go, but it's very important you put a lot of effort into making sure this reflects the way you want it to be reflected, okay? If you're using landed costs, you're going to have to set up a landed cost account in here somewhere. And you cannot set up landed cost account in the wizard for landed cost. It's a glitch, but you want to set that account up first and then map it. Okay, so we've got our list. We've hit on our item list. Categories are brand new to 2023. I'm going to make this little baby smaller so I get more real estate. So if you want to categorize different items in different categories, you know, you could go ahead and do that. I know in the past we've used things like custom fields and things to do that, but you now have the option of using categories. Now, if we go into an edit item, now that I'm talking about custom fields, you may very well need custom fields, and you'll go here into the custom fields, and you could set up new custom fields, defined fields. And this is just another way to slice and dice, but it's not what I call a baked in field. So you can't report on it as robustly as you could like a baked in field, like classes or item name and stuff like that, where it's already default in the system. But it is a nice workaround if you need to slice and dice or you need to identify things differently. So you could pick the data type. You can say it's required on transactions or lists, and then you could say what the label is and so forth, okay? In QuickBooks, you have several different kinds of items, okay? With construction, I most typically see you using service items, inventory parts, non-inventory parts, other charges, and the rest. The difference between a non-inventory part and inventory part's in the name, but it doesn't, people a lot of times don't think about it. It determines if you're keeping it in inventory and doing stock status reports and things like that, that's an inventory part. If you're buying it for a job, then that's a non-inventory part. Okay. So there you go. There's your items. And then your service items are like your labor and things like that. If it's a one-sided item, it looks like this. If you need it two-sided, which you need for job costing, right? You have to click this button. This service or whatever it is used in assemblies or performed by subcontractor partner. The reason you turn that on is because you're going to want to track your revenue and your cost, right? Think about your reports, revenue and cost. So we need to turn that on. If you don't turn it on, it's not going to work. Okay, so just make sure you turn it on. And if you need help with any of this, you know where we are. Okay, we've got your fixed asset item list, which would be your PP&E, your property, plant, equipment stuff, you know, your big trucks, things like that. You can track them here. Okay, item new. And it's going to request all your, you know, uh, what's the word? When it was put into service information and things like that. You do have a fixed asset manager with QuickBooks Desktop or Enterprise, wherein you don't have it with QuickBooks Online. So if you have a lot of fixed assets you're tracking, make sure you put them there. They had this baby fixed asset tracker for a brief millisecond online and it went away. So I'm thinking they're improving it and bringing it back. But that's what you get with QuickBooks Online. It's a great program. You get some of the newest features first, but you also sometimes see them adjusting things and it affects things in ways you don't expect. Price level list we talked about briefly. It probably doesn't apply, but if it does, reach out to us. Same thing with billing rate. Payroll item list, if you're using payroll, there you go. Payroll schedule list, are your people biweekly, weekly, monthly, whatever. Classes, if you're using classes. And then you've got your customer and vendor profile lists, okay? Your job type list. So if you want to break stuff out between like residential, commercial, the rest of it, you'd use a job type list. And you've got your templates, which we talked about. You can make this look however you want it to. We actually have somebody here who does a really great job on templates. So if you need some help making your own template, let us know and we'll help you out. Memorize transactions just means I want this to post every month, every week, every whatever, you know, and what kind of transaction is it? Add and edit multiple list entries. This is one of my favorite fields. Okay. If you have Excel and you're able to use Excel, you can actually copy and paste from Excel here. So if you're setting up your own file, for most of your list items with some, you know, limitations, you can actually do a lot of that here. Also, let's see, vendor items. If you need to change, oh, biscuits, something to do with vendors. There's a new feature that vendors have. Um, no. Oh, I'm pulling a blank, guys. It's because I was thinking, okay. Well, I'm pulling a blank, but there's something to do with vendors. I did a video on it recently. Why am I pulling description vendor partner? Is the vendor your with your lead time and things like that with your vendors. Oh, enhanced vendors. I think it's called enhanced vendors. Why was that so hard for me? I apologize. It just was not there today. I did a video on this actually though. You can update your vendor information here. This is the only place you can update it though. Okay, so that's important to remember. So let's go back into our lists. Okay, and then manage groups. Okay, you could group your customers, and this helps with different features here. Okay. I know what you guys are wanting to hear about, and I know that you're being patient with me. You want to know the job cost reports, but we're going to get to it, okay? Under contractor, you've got your job costing center, which is only available with the contractor edition. So if you like the dashboard look, you can pull it up here, okay? And then you create your estimates and change orders here. The way estimates and change orders work is you could create an estimate and it will detect when you go to create, when you make a change, and it'll say, is this a change order? And you'll say yes. But you'll notice when you're doing estimates, invoices, what's it say here? Items. This is why I go back to the whole chart of accounts versus items thing. People do not realize what a difference it creates when you're in construction and doing job cost in desktop. Okay, so let's go over here. Okay, go over here. Okay, create invoices. Oh, and another thing to note is all this stuff links together and you can also attach files to it, like I mentioned. So if you have certain contracts and things you need to attach, this is where you'll do it. I'm going to pause this right now and take a brief break and I'll be right back. And we're back. So we're on the estimate screen. Here you have your item information, your description information, and so on, so on, so on. Okay. If you have related transactions, they will show up here. You can change your template here. If you do have classes, you can do that here, and you've got your customers and jobs. In QuickBooks, jobs are like a sub customer, and we'll touch base on that in a minute. You can also look at some of your features here. You've got new transaction, you've got save this transaction, delete it, create a copy, memorize, mark it as an active estimate. So then you've got print, email, and the rest. Okay. And then if you want to use this and turn it into something else, like this estimate's ready for a sales order, or this estimate's ready for an invoice or a purchase order, you can do all that here. Underneath the formatting tab is where you're going to do all of your template edits unless you're using that template list. Okay. And then you've got your send and ship, which is touching on the email stuff we set up earlier. And then here's some related reports, but we're going to go through them under the reports feature. So I'm not going to touch on that here. And then there's your search. Okay. So then we've got sales orders. So the first thing you have at QuickBooks is the estimate. The second one is a sales order. And in this template, we've turned the sales order to a pack slip, but just pretend this says sales order. Okay. The estimate is like your quote. The sales order reserves quantities, reserves stuff for that customer. Okay. And so you have a lot of the same features for the sake of redundancy. I'm not going to go through a whole lot of it again. Same thing, formatting, reports, and so on. If you want to know how, and you notice you didn't have this, I don't believe, on the estimate because it's non-posting, which means you're not going to have a journal entry. But every one of these forms and transactions actually has a journal entry that works behind the scenes to post this. Can you imagine being like 100 years ago and having to do every single one of these by hand? Like it boggles the mind. Anyway, so if you want to see a journal entry of what's happening, so if you say to me, hey, I did this, I don't know where the other side of this is, I need to find it. Click on your reports button, click that transaction journal. You can also see the transaction history, what's linked to it. Okay, so then we've got sales order fulfillment worksheet, which we're not going to really touch on today. I don't even think I turned it on. I'm surprised. So here's your sales order fulfillment worksheet. Let's go down here. Invoices. I am trying to keep this at a normal length. I get people that are like, I love your manufacturing video, but it is 2 hours long. Are you aware of that? Yes, I was actually there, believe it or not. And that was a lot of water I had to drink. So under the invoices, here's where you're actually recognizing your revenue if you're accrual based. And again, it looks very similar. Okay, very similar to the rest. If you have book time or costs that you need to add to this invoice, you can click here and it's going to pop up a little screen. If you need to receive payments, you can do it with the customer receive payment screen. You can also do it here. You can create batches of different invoices. I find that this is most helpful with like rent and stuff. I don't know that when your invoices are different, that a batch is a way to go. Then we have refund and credit. Now, something to note is people sometimes think that also refunds their money if it was a credit card transaction. That does not always refund their money. So just make sure that when you do the refund and credit, you make sure however the method was that you were paid for it, make sure that that reversal goes through. Okay. So then we've got customers, and then we're moving down from here. Invoices, we talked about batch invoices. Sales receipts are just like an invoice, but it's not touching your accounts receivable account. That's when it's like you're going to Walmart and going through the checkout. It's happening at the same time. An invoice is saying you owe me this money and you're paying me later. Now later could be in 2 minutes, but that's what it's saying. It's saying you owe me this money, it's going to touch accounts receivable, you're paying me later. With a sales receipt, it's going, you're buying this from me right now, and we're switching funds at that same time. You see how that's different? Okay. So depending on the timing, you pick sales receipt or invoice. Statement charges, if you do heavy statements, I see this mainly illegal, then you can enter statement charges that fall into a statement later. And then you can create statements. If you have like several invoices you need to put on a statement, you can do that too. And then we already talked about the finance charge setup. When you're ready to assess those finance charges, that happens here. Payment reminders we talked about. You see how preferences touches everything? Everything. It is like the little engine that could. It's the thing that nobody thinks about, and it's so important. Receive payments, like I just said, you can receive payments from the screen here. It'd be helpful if I actually use my cursor, or you can receive payments from the receive payment piece. Okay, then you've got your income tracker, lead center. Most people that I know do not use a lead center, but if you don't have a ton of leads to track and you don't need a full-blown CRM, this might be the way to go. Okay, and then we already talked about credit card processing. Come to us if you need it because we can offer that training service. Okay, and you can enter your time from here, and so on. And then it brings you back to item list. A lot of the things in QuickBooks are easy to find, but the reason they're easy is because they put it in multiple places. They're trying to figure out intuitively how you would find things. And so for me, I use Excel a lot. So I always go generate to my top bar. But you've got a left-hand navigation, you've got your ribbon across the top, you've got all these little ways to get around. So with all that being said, let's go in our customer center because I want to show you how a customer profile is. Okay. I talked about how you have customers and jobs in QuickBooks Enterprise, and a customer and a job is basically a customer and a sub-customer, but that sub-customer is the job. Oh my gosh, it's making me cross-eyed. Yes, you want to understand that when you're in construction, you're using QuickBooks, okay? The customer is a customer I'm doing it for. The job is whatever I'm making for them, okay? So when you go into Miss Heather's house job, okay, if this was a customer, you wouldn't see this customer screen to the top right. You see how it says customer to the top right? You put the job name house, or if you have a job code, I have customers who put the code at the beginning or use it as a job name. You do whatever you feel comfortable with. You have this address info screen, which is very self-explanatory. You have your payment settings, again, self-explanatory. I'm getting to the juicy bit. Additional info, self-explanatory. Job info, this is where it keys into your job costing, okay? You put your job description here, you put your job type. Remember I said we want to talk about different kinds of job types? Well, this is coming back around, okay? Um, if I was in construction, I'd probably break it out into commercial, residential, and then maybe the size of the job if I wanted. Or maybe you use it as a state thing, like you use the job type to track your state revenue. I don't know. Actually, I think state would probably be a different one. I would use classes for that. So I would use classes for that, I think. Anyway, so you have your start date on the job and the projected end date and the real end date. Until you put an end date in here, if it's already started, it's showing up on your job cost reports. Once you have an end date in there, it shouldn't show up on your job cost reports. It should only be active jobs. Okay. Okay. So that is where you want to make sure when people will say, well, how do I set up a job in QuickBooks? You just saw it. It's that easy. Okay. So vendors is very similar to customers, so much similar. But with construction, I believe there is a special little field there that they don't have with other versions of QuickBooks. So let's touch base on this. Let me make sure that I'm not lying first. Address info, account settings, we've got vendor type. Aha! Haha! See, you have these random bits of information. They just come and surprise you once in a while. Contractor Edition is the only edition that has these fields here that says workers' comp expires on this date, general liability expires on just this date. See how helpful that is? Because when you are in construction, you have to track that stuff, right? So there you go. That's different, and that's something that's just in the Contractor Edition. The rest of it is very similar to customer, okay, as you could tell, okay? If you do 1099s within QuickBooks, you want to make sure you're filling out your tax settings there too. Okay, so that's vendors. I can hear it now. You didn't go in depth enough on vendors. Well, I'll do a video if y'all send me a comment. I'm trying to keep this, I'd like to say an hour. Let's be honest though, I don't know if it's going to be an hour. This is one of those biggie videos. So then we have, you do have bill approval flows in QuickBooks Enterprise. I'm not going to go through that today, but you have them. So if you have to have an approval process, there you go. If your pay bill screen, oh, maybe I should go through enter bills first. That would make sense. Now I'm skipping too much. So if you need to enter a bill, and if it's a vendor credit, there's no credit toggle. But if we're entering a bill, you just enter the bill stuff here, and then make sure that if this touched a job, you want to make sure you write this down. Don't use expenses. Expenses are for overhead, things that are not touching your job costing. Items is stuff that's touching your job costing. Okay? So what's the item? What was it? What was the cost? What job did it go to? And so forth. You see how important that is? If you're not using items, it's not going to show up in your job cost report. That's just how it is. And there's that little button for the intercompany transactions. I need to do the video for it. There's your landed cost. So if you have landed costs, once you have all this entered, you would hit calculate landed costs and it brings up another prompt to go through it, but I'm going to skip past that for today. And then you could pay it individually or pay it with the pay bill screen, which is really what I prefer because I like to see what's open as we're sitting here and paying them. If you have a purchase order that was associated with this vendor, you can hit that select PO and select it. There is a nuance to this flow that came up on a recent project where I believe it's, was it, you can't do, we found a limitation where you cannot pay, you can't enter a bill for multiple item receipts, maybe was what it was. You have to have one item receipt per bill. I might have that wrong. Or it was, yeah, I think that might be what it was. You can't enter a bill for multiple item receipts. So that's something to keep in mind. And if I'm wrong, correct me, but I'm pretty sure that is because I actually had this pop up. It's one of those things that you learn with experience, and that situation popped up and we had to change the workflow. Okay, so under employees, if you use payroll, this is where you would have it all set up. Okay, again, I heartily recommend if you're in construction and this is a viable option for you, going with QuickBooks Payroll. Okay. Then we have inventory center, your item list we already went over. Assemblies really is this manufacturing thing, so I'm not going to touch base on it today, but if you need information on that, let me know. We already went through new inventory items. If you've set up all your items and you gasp, have negative quantities, things like that, you have to fix stuff, right? Or you have waste, damaged inventory, things like that, you use this adjust quantity value on hand. That's called an inventory adjustment, okay? Here is a tip. When you do your adjustment account, don't pick your inventory account to adjust it to because that'll go out and in. And when people are troubleshooting, they'll say, well, the first thing we do, which is the first thing we do when we're troubleshooting inventory, is we make sure that there's no journal entries in the system, that they all went through adjustments, if there's any adjustments to your inventory quantities and valuations. And that's because it ties into a report, as most of this stuff does. But if you have that adjustment account going right back in inventory, you've just nullified your own adjustment. Okay, so you need to have an adjustment account. If it's inventory waste or it's just global inventory, whatever, you have to have an adjustment account. Cycle counts, I'll explain what they are, but I'm not going to go through it. You have physical inventory where you count everything you have on hand. A cycle counts if I'm like, hey, I've got a ton of items here. I want to break this up into baby chunks. And that's what you would do, okay? That's a cycle count. And then you can assign those cycle counts to people using the Warehouse Manager app, using your Android device, which is the same one that we do barcodes on, which is what we touched base on earlier in this video. And all that information has other videos too. If you need more information, let me know. You can create your purchase orders, receive your items here, turn on your advanced inventory, change your prices, and so on. Under banking, it's all pretty self-explanatory. Make sure that you're reconciling your bank account at a minimum every month. But if you can, take a look at your entire balance sheet and your profit and loss and make sure everything looks accurate. Don't leave it for the last minute. And if it's coming up on the last minute, like it is right now, we're in November when I'm filming this and you need help with your books, reach out to us. We can help with that cleanup. All right, reports. I hear people going, finally, she gets to the reports. Yes, finally, I'm getting to the reports. For the purpose of today's video, I am going to focus on our job cost reports, okay? And as you can see with QuickBooks Enterprise, I think they said once there's like over 300 different types of reports, and job cost reports is a good chunk of them as well, okay? Here's a job profitability detail report. This is where it's going to go on one job, and I'm going to pick Heather's house and hit OK. And you're going to see where all this stuff we've talked about up till now starts to come into fruition. Okay. Here's Miss Heather's house. Ignore that test I did because it throws off the whole flow. Let's just scroll down here. Here's my actual cost. This is the sum of all the bills and expenses that's been entered against this and put to the item tab. Item tab, okay? If you use the expense side, you won't see that here, and you're going to wonder why. It has to be in the item tab, okay? Here's the revenue we've received for that, okay? And this is the difference. So right now that's what our profit is, okay? Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. If you use the estimate side, but you listed the customer, but you didn't use the items, you would see something down here called non-specified. And that just means, guess what, Goofy, you forgot to put it on the items tab, okay? And then I love, you see how we numbered our items here, our cost codes? Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. Now just imagine, for the sake of imagining, that we're not to the point of any of this. We're actually just working on siding. You see how it'd be like 9, 10, 11, and then you're done. And then as you get to the rest of it, it starts rolling down. So this is also a good indicator is how far you've gotten in the project, you know? Um, you could change your columns if you want. You collapse the rows if you want. You could also do this on general ledger reports. My nose is stuffy. You can memorize this report, but this is one of my most popular reports for my construction clients. Okay, let's go ahead and go a little bit further. All right, and then we've got our estimates versus actual summary, which is a very popular report as well. Here's our estimated cost. That's coming from our estimate and what items we have in that estimate. Okay, guys, because people are going to want to know. All right, then we have our actual costs. These are bills and expenses that have actually booked. What's the difference? What was our estimated revenue from the estimate? Okay, what was our actual revenue? And what was our difference? Okay, now remember how I said on the items you have to make sure they're double-sided? If you didn't make those double-sided, these columns are going to be wonky and they're not going to be right. So make sure that you set it up correctly. Okay, and then you've got some different, different reports here that you can look at. Okay, okay. Under contractor reports, you've got your contractor reports. If you do certified payroll, which I believe QuickBooks Payroll supports, you could actually do that as well. Let's see what else we have. Cost to complete by job summary, estimates versus actuals. Let's do our cost to complete. I can't go through every single one of these reports, but I've just tried to give you an example of uh, um, the different ones available. So with cost to complete, it asked me the percent complete on all those jobs and then it brought it up. Did you see that? And then it'll calculate this for you. Okay. Oh, that's a cool one. Expenses not assigned to jobs. That's pretty cool. Okay. Let's see. Perfect. Okay. Percent progress. There's your job progress. Invoices versus what's it, estimates. There's one report I was working on. See if I can find it real quick. Aha, my whip. Y'all love saying whip. Okay. My whip report. Where's my whip report? Okay, this percent complete is a self-calculated column. It's your estimated, I believe it's your actual cost divided by actual revenue. Um, yeah, there you go. And that's how it calculates that column. I have had people say before that they want to calculate it differently. That's totally up to you. You can create your own custom report to track that. But QuickBooks does have a WIP report. Okay. And then we have time by job summary and detail. So if you're having to do some manual allocations, you don't do payroll in the system, and you're trying to do some job costing, some of those time reports are going to be very helpful. As you know, there's just so many, we just can't go through them all. Committed cost by job. You've got your, let's see, we've got our vendor reports, purchases reports, inventory. Now, a lot of these are going to be mainly for manufacturing and other businesses. I'm really trying to fine tune on hone in on the job costing today. Okay. If you have a separate account for your WIP reports or for your WIP on your balance sheet where you're trying to track WIP in a different window, there's videos out there and resources that'll work through like workflows that you can do to kind of do that with transactions. Um, I'm a fan of the KISS method. What I would do is do an accrual and just move those funds to the WIP for the reporting purposes, and then just set up the system the way it's supposed to be set up. But that being said, you know, you need to do whatever your advisor advises you to do. Let's see, accountant and taxes. There's a lot of really helpful things here. Transaction list by date is really helpful if you're trying to run like a log of your checks. Transaction detail by account. I use that report all the time. Let's see, budgets and forecasts. If you want to run up what budget, here we go. There you go. Here's your budget. You can have multiple budgets with QuickBooks Desktop. Okay, budget versus actual. Okay, now QuickBooks sample file, they have a different date, so this isn't showing up the way you would see it. Typically, you would have your actual stuff here, but there you go. I think we're coming up on the end of it, to be honest with you. I mean, we could play around more with some of these reports. I'll run that committed cost report for you real quick. But we might actually have kept it under an hour. Look, here's your committed cost report. All right. So, that all being said, if you would like to dive into the reports a little bit more, you can set up a paid training. If you're interested in using us for training help, implementation help, and the rest, or you just want a discount on your software, we have free software consultations. We have a variety of paid services and free services, and we're here to help. But do me a favor, like the video if you liked it, like or subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, and stay tuned. We'll have our next video out soon. Thanks again for watching, and if there was anything I didn't dive into enough, let me know because I can do another video on that, and I'll make sure that it'll lead into that at the end of this one. Thanks again. Bye.